Most people think 20 years in the military guarantees security. They think once you hit retirement, everything just kind of works out. You know, the money, the peace, the stability, the purpose. But after serving over 2 decades, I need to tell you the truth, folks, because what 20 years actually gives you is far more complicated than most people realize. Greetings and salutations. This is the Adjutant, and today I want to have a very honest conversation with you, not a motivational conversation, not a recruiting conversation, not a bitter conversation, just an honest one. Because there are a lot of people right now who believe that if they simply survive long enough to hit 20 years in the military, everything afterward will somehow automatically make sense. And I understand why people think that, because for decades, 20 years has been presented almost like the promised land. You just keep going, you keep sacrificing, you keep deploying, keep missing holidays, keep moving your family, keep enduring stress, keep carrying responsibility, and one day you cross the finish line, the retirement ceremony. Now, shadow box, handshake, flag, photos, and everybody says congratulations, but what nobody really explains is what happens after the applause ends. Because the truth is, 20 years of military service gives you some extraordinary things, but it also costs you some things. And if nobody tells you both sides, you walk into retirement with unrealistic expectations. Now, before I continue, let me make something very clear. I am deeply grateful for my military career. It changed my life. It really has. The military gave me structure. It gave me discipline. It gave me opportunity. It gave me education, leadership experience, exposure to the world, a pension, healthcare access, professional growth. And for many people, including me, the military absolutely creates upward mobility. It can completely change the trajectory of your life. But that still does not mean the journey is easy. It does not mean the ending looks like the way people imagine, because one of the first things 20 years gives you is exhaustion. And people don't talk about that enough. Not just physical exhaustion, soul exhaustion, decision fatigue, responsibility fatigue, emotional fatigue. You spend years being accountable for missions, for people, for families, for evaluations, for standards, for performance. All of these things you are dealing with, survival, all of those things. You become conditioned to always carry pressure, even when you're off duty. You're not really fully off duty. Your nervous system adapts to vigilance. And after enough years, many military members stop realizing how heavy that weight actually became, until one day the uniform comes off and suddenly you realize how tired you really are. Not weak, not broken, very tired. Another thing 20 years gives you is perspective. A level of perspective most people never develop. You stop panicking over small things. You stop being impressed by titles. You stop needing external validation as much, because after enough years of life experience, deployments, loss, hardship, mistakes, you begin to understand what truly matters. Health matters. Time matters. Good people matter. And honestly, a lot of things society obsesses over start feeling very small to you. 20 years also gives you stories, some funny, some painful, some sacred, stories nobody outside that world will fully ever understand. You remember the people, the late night conversations, the deployments, the ridiculous moments, the funerals, the fears, the laughter, the absolute chaos. You remember younger versions of yourself, versions that were hopeful, versions that were struggling, versions that were trying to survive. And one of the strangest parts about aging in the military is realizing how many versions of yourself existed along the way. The young private, the young lieutenant, the young NCO, the young captain, the officer trying to lead, the person trying to hold everything together. 20 years gives you identity transformation, but it also creates identity confusion because eventually the institution that structured your entire life no longer needs you the same way. And that transition can be harder than people admit. Now, for some retirees, the loss of structure hits hard. There's no formations, there's no reporting, no rank structure, no military rhythm, and your entire identity became tied to service. And if your entire identity became tied to service, retirement can feel emotionally disorienting. Even if financially you're okay, that's why I always tell people, build a life beyond the uniform, before the uniform comes off. Develop interests, relationships, purpose, vision, because eventually all military careers end, and if you don't intentionally build the next chapter, you can drift emotionally afterward. Now, financially, let's talk honestly, because this is where many people become disappointed. A military pension is valuable, very valuable, especially in today's economy. And people should absolutely appreciate the long-term stability it can provide. But some people imagine military retirement means automatic wealth, and that simply is not true. For many retirees, the pension helps create stability, not luxury, especially depending on your rank, your years of service, debt, divorce, inflation, all of those things to include healthcare, family obligations, financial literacy. Some retirees thrive, others struggle badly. And one major difference is whether they prepared financially before retirement arrived. Because retirement magnifies your habits. If you manage money poorly before retirement, retirement usually exposes it. If you develop discipline, investing habits, low debt, retirement becomes much more peaceful. And one of the greatest mistakes military members make is assuming 20 years alone guarantees financial freedom. It does not. The pension is a foundation, folks, not the entire house. Now, one thing military service absolutely gives many people is resilience, real resilience, not social media resilience, not motivational quote resilience, real resilience. That kind developed through hardship, through uncertainty, through responsibility, through adapting repeatedly, and that resilience becomes valuable for the rest of your life. Because eventually you realize you can survive difficult seasons. You've already done the hard things. You've already endured uncertainty. You've already rebuilt yourself multiple times. I can attest to that. And that confidence matters, but I also want to say something important here, folks. All right? Now, something important. 20 years can also cost you relationships, sometimes marriage, sometimes closeness with children, sometimes emotional openness, sometimes health, sometimes peace, and many veterans quietly carry invisible emotional wear from years of compartmentalization, years of functioning, years of suppressing emotion, because the mission came first, and eventually some people retire physically while still carrying emotional weight they never fully processed. That part is real too. And I think we need more honest conversations about that. Not to discourage service, but to prepare people realistically, because military service is not just a career. It's a lifestyle. It's a culture, an identity. And after enough years, it changes you. Some changes are beautiful, some are painful. Most are permanent. Now, if you're younger and watching this, you might ask, was it worth it? For me, yes, absolutely yes, but not because it was easy and not because it solved all of my problems. It was worth it because it gave me opportunity, it gave me wisdom, it gave me discipline, perspective, and the ability to help others. But I also understand now that no institution can fully define your worth as a human being. Not rank, not title, not retirement status, and at some point, you must decide who you are beyond performance, beyond productivity, beyond achievement, beyond the uniform. And honestly, that may be one of the hardest transitions of all. So if you're currently serving, don't wait until retirement to build your life. Build your health now. Build your finances now. Build your emotional intelligence now, because build your purpose now. Build meaningful relationships now, because one day the uniform will come off. And when that day arrives, and it will arrive, you want to retire into something, not just retire away from something. And that distinction matters more than people realize. I hope this has been helpful. This is the Adjutant, and I'll see you in the next one. I wish you all blessings and blessings. Shalom.